Ms. Herkenroder?
Present.
Mr. Pfeiffer?
Present.
Ms. Worthing?
Present.
We have 9 present.
We have 9 council members present.
Okay, it just rolled back down. It's a blue screen right now. I'm waiting to see if it kicks in.
If you ready with the PowerPoint, Mr. Colleague.
I think we're having some technical difficulties still on this.
Yeah, we're working it out right now.
Well, until we smooth those technical difficulties out, we do
Yeah, right now it's just showing a solid blue screen.
proposed map out in the hallway.
After powering it back on, so it's just like, you know, the blue standby screen.
And if I don't misspeak myself, at some point down the road, as we're introduced to these proposals, you'll find out who's been working on our behalf. And eventually, if we get all our minds together, I understand that the city council will approve eventually a map with new boundaries every 10 years.
Yes.
But
yeah, this isn't mine. It's another city employee who's doing it.
I would like to sit down and call the people out
Said
there.
it's another city employee.
Let people know what's going on.
Can you go to that setting again where you were?
And I appreciate this meeting being called in the middle of our organization, or lack thereof. You know, we had a meeting, and in between, we didn't have a council sit. And so this meeting was called, timely, however it was called. I'm glad to see all of us here. And I'm gonna turn it over to them for now.
Yes, it is. No, it's not searching anymore. It's just showing us a solid blue screen. I'm gonna try to restab, pull out your end, and
In accordance with the Flint City Charter, the Election Commission, which is composed of the city attorney, the city assessor, and the city clerk, have a number of responsibilities throughout the year. Under the charter, the commission has, in addition to the monthly things that we oversee, the things that we have to do once every 10 years, which is to play a key role in the community in terms of revising the ward map. That particular revision takes place after the U.S. Census is approved. And as you all know, the census was a little bit delayed this current year in terms of its approval. Therefore, the approval at the state level cities are on top of everything at this point. So we have some time frames that we must meet in order to get the approval of the community. So the three of us, Ms. Angela Wheeler, Ms. Stacy from the assessor's office, we've been meeting all the time to try to put together the map or proposed map of the city of Flint. One of the things that we were faced with is the extreme loss of population of the city of Flint. As you all know, I think during the last census, we had
Windows
about
PT. Okay.
100 and some odd thousand people. Now we're down to
Key for location. That window key.
take all nine
Yeah,
wards
that's what
because
we're doing.
we cannot
Yeah,
reduce
we've
the
been trying
wards.
that.
Because
The
the charter
different settings,
indicates
we tried extending, we tried duplicate, we tried second string,
in fact,
none of them
looking
worked.
at, we had to divide the 81,120 people up into the nine wards. Therefore, roughly 9,000 people per ward.
Gotcha,
Now, you
yeah,
might
it could
say
either be the PC or
go
maybe
with
the
that
HDMI
9,000,
cord.
but under the law, we
Yeah, I
cannot.
don't know.
We can maybe go over by 1% probably. So we'll try not to do that because we want to like
This is your own personal cord?
So what I would like to do this time.
Yeah, but the cord is too. Okay, yeah, he said the HDMI cord was already here. Plugged in.
Very, very closely with us on this particular census, but on the last census as well, and that is Ken.
Yeah, we might just have to go with the hard copies we got here then.
He's been with us through particular things, and we really enjoy working with him. He's really an expert in that regard. And he's going to be the star of the show tonight, once all the technical difficulties are worked out, in terms of the presentation.
Oh yeah, facts. I mean, yeah, I'm not a city employee, so I'm definitely not putting no blame on y'all. Right. Interesting. Well, yeah, I'd hope the meeting would take precedent, but yeah, I feel what you're saying. Yeah, I mean, we'll make do with what we got down here, I guess. I don't know if anybody else having a computer at the immediate end though, so yeah, we'll see. Okay, for sure. Yep.
Right there? Okay. Just to give you a little background, as Clerk Brown had indicated, pursuant to the state law under MCL 117.278, and also Code Charter 2-202, every 10 years to reestablish what the boundaries are in the city for each of the wards. So,
I think what it is here is kind of in the mayor's office. For some reason, I told him that he pretty much told me everything that the guy upstairs told him to try. He says the only thing now it could be is either the HDMI cord or it's not like the computer it's on, so he can either swap one of those two to see if it works. But we didn't have, I didn't know if there was another computer available to try from.
Not that I know of.
Yeah.
There's one here, but he's in the mayor's office. It cannot be disturbed.
Under the city charter, it says
That's what I heard.
divided into
There's an IT guy.
electoral
It's in the mayor's office. They can't be disturbed.
and
Cannot come
the
down
boards
here.
shall be contiguous, compacted, and nearly equal.
I asked Ken Collada if there was anything else he was gonna need.
And so that's what
Did not
we,
say projector, I would've gotten one.
is to do that, and part of that, which is really the most important,
We don't know.
significant part.
I don't know. I mean, it finally turned on. That was the biggest issue. And then now that it's on, it should be as simple as putting the cord in and plug and play. You know what I'm saying?
To be able to,
Yeah, my bad. Okay. Yeah, it should have been just plug and play.
contribute your voice and to
We
let
need someone
let
that's
us
really,
know,
really tech savvy. You're pretty tech savvy, aren't you?
I just don't know the system. I didn't put it in. You know what I mean? I don't know. All I can do is guess what the issue is. Is either not talking to the computer right or the cord is acting weird.
and not vary by more than 1%.
Right, it might be the laptop, or it might be the HDMI cord.
We work to do
Yeah, and they said that Jeff said that they had a presentation last week and it worked perfectly fine with
There
that
will be
cord.
an ordinance, an enforcement
Really?
Yeah.
ordinance, pursuant to law
So,
and charter. That will then be presented to the council, for further review and approval. So we want to
Yeah,
make
I
sure
saw that. It was cycling. Like what it does is it cycles to find the signal, but now it's not even cycling. So, and unless we have a remote, I can't
A remote.
for the projector. Like, why we change it? But the issue is right now, I think it's getting a signal, but I think it's either the computer's talking to it wrong or the cord is bad, because you saw earlier it was cycling, right? And then we turned it off, turned it back on. Now it's just chilling on the blue screen. Blue screen means signal, but bad signal. So,
So he's gonna have to give his presentation from the maps.
yes, but luckily, I mean, I can put this, I'm about to put this on this phone so that way I can at least put it online for people to see. But yeah, everybody in the building. Huh?
Does he talk about that map?
Yeah.
I mean, if he has a PowerPoint, he can send it to us. I can try to go print copies of whatever.
This
That's
isn't the
true.
same one?
No, the PowerPoint wouldn't be. Presentation.
I need to take a picture of his.
I'll tell him that. Do you know right now?
With the maps that you have in your hands, everybody have a clear gas structure at Tennessee County. So I assisted just at the technical level with the management process. As I mentioned earlier, there's requirements, certain requirements for the process. Charter. So the 9 wards we were given, and the goal of reaching the population within those wards as possible, but more specifically within 1% is a bit challenging. Due to the population changes, the overall loss and the unequal loss, of course, drives those changes as it did 10 years ago as well. So, so you obviously can't leave them the way they are. So, kind of speaking on behalf, I guess, of the committee, essentially just trying to follow major roads and keep those reasonably compact shapes to define the wards. The software company, we use software that we use also for the county redistricting for the county commissioners. The way the census data comes is it's by census blocks, and that's the smallest geography in the census data. It's every little tiny area is defined by physical features almost 100% of the time. Roads, railroads, rivers, and so those blocks can be very, very small. There's a lot of them, there's over 3,000 in the city. And then they have a population assigned to those for the purpose of redistricting. And that information was released early just for districting purposes. The real census data, real final census data in terms of all the other types of admins besides population will come out in at least next year. I think it might be 2 years down the road before they have all of that information. But for redistricting, they distribute very basic population information. So these numbers are based on total population in those blocks. And as I said, the software would be very hard to do this on a paper map because you have to start adding up all those numbers, and then every time you start moving things around, you're doing all this math. And the software where we just go in there and we tag those blocks with a given ward, and then it does all the math for you. On the maps, the small map here that we handed out, that doesn't have a lot of detail. I can't fit a lot on the small map. I tried to have the major roads on there that are the former boundaries. There's a larger map out in the lobby that has more of the small streets on it just to see it. If there's areas that aren't following major roads, it's because we had to decide, or they decided, to get to the balance. It was just starting to move blocks from one to another. We ended up, I didn't bring the printed out report, but I have the total population numbers for. The target was 9,000.
Does it have an HDMI port on the side?
Due to the fact that.
Yes, it does.
On your board had one person in them, so it reminds me of the block a little bit. Bunch of those blocks have no people in them. The blocks, as I said, will be all these geographic features, so literally, if the highway is divided, there'll be a block or two. Population count is zero. I think that kind of covers most of the technical stuff. Does anybody have any questions?
You're taking questions?
I
Okay.
think that's it then.
What are the significant changes in the word boundary?
Well, I mean, generally speaking,
Can you
because,
repeat this question?
the question was, what are the significant changes in the boundaries? I mean, I'd say just in general, because of the population loss was unequal, they generally speaking had to move south. So there'll be larger areas in the north, but there's fewer people in those areas.
Okay. Also, you mentioned there's been a lot of talk in the past years in the community about decreasing the number of wards, and it was stated tonight that because of the charter. Is there any way of amending the charter? Any discussion about amending the charter?
I'll repeat the question. So the question was, there was talk in the past of reducing the number of wards, and there was a statement that the wards are laid out in the charter. So the question is, what would be the process to, I guess, revise the charter? Since I'm the mapping guy, I'll leave it for
It would have to be done by a charter amendment, so it would have to be either the council through resolution, goes that way to put it onto the ballot. So it would have to go through the election process. If there was a specific provision of the charter specifically reducing the ward boundaries, or the number of wards, that would have to go through that, or a specific percentage of the voters to put it on to the question for an election.
Petition.
Yeah, by petition, thank you.
Have there been any discussions about that, or that's not being considered?
No, I have not, I've not been part of any conversations about that.
And one more question is, what is the time frame for these boundaries to be put in place?
For I believe it's within, is it the next 30
Within
days?
what?
I believe it's the next 30 to 60 days, but let me check that, let me verify that information.
Thank you.
And I believe that the city clerk may be able to fill in some more specifics.
Doesn't like it.
And when the charter committee was meeting, they met for about 2 years, a year and a half, before the new charter became effective in 2018. In that regard, a number of things they discussed included the decrease in the number of wards in the city of Flint. They were decreasing it down from 9 to 7. One time they talked about 8 or whatever. But they came back then to the conclusion that they wanted it to remain at 9. So when the charter was presented to you all to vote upon, you voted upon the 9 wards. Thank you.
You have a question?
Yeah, well, I guess I don't know if it's mapping or not. Being that the state has a commission, county has a commission, and the city has a commission, and I just want this just for future reference. I don't know where we fall, but why do the commissioners vote on their maps council votes on the city maps. I was just wondering why that would be.
I'm not quite sure. I mean, I would imagine it's because one is under, like I said, the council boundaries come under the jurisdiction of the city. So there's, sorry about this, it's a mess. But like I said, one goes through the commissioners, the county commissioners, and the other goes through the city of Flint. But I do know that in the charter, it only speaks to the ward boundaries for the city of Flint, for the city council members. And there was things has to be updated, and D sub lowercase c, the portion of, we have to cover the portion of the ordinance that we have to release the 10-year census, decennial census, and thereafter at least 6 months prior to the city primary election, which of course applies. So this is something that we kind of need to start doing now, because I believe there will be an election coming up in, which election would the next one be, Clerk Brown?
There's an August 2022 election.
Okay, and Clerk Brown was saying there's an August 2022 election. So this will need to be done in advance of that. And it says here at least 6 months prior to the city's primary election, which of course applies. So it needs to be done 6 months prior to the August election. So even though it might seem like it's a little early, it's really not. We've got to keep moving on this, and so that's what we're coordinating.
So the council and the mayor has to agree on this map that you all come up with.
Yeah, this is talking about, just to verify, or also support what the council president was saying. It is the city council that's in charge of revising boundaries for the city.
And that language is found under the whole.
Yes, it's, the Home Rule City Act is under MCL 117, state law, but also which mirrors what our charter says as well in Article 2.
So I know these aren't proposed for if residents wanted to express, let's say, concerns, because I can see on a couple of these lines, some neighborhoods are split between two wards that are currently one ward. What would that process look like for expressing any concerns about boundaries for like residents have been doing with the state commission?
I think that this is one what this meeting is for as well, but I'm going to defer to the clerk. There are some other avenues as far as, like I said, written comment being received or email comments and things of that nature, because, like I said, we want to make sure that we're hearing from everyone, and so maybe more than one avenue. And I don't know, Clerk Brown, if you want to expand on that now.
I think you've done a good job.
Okay, so we'll make sure that we have other mechanisms available for the public, so that even folks who may not make it down to the dome have an opportunity to provide their input. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Rich.
Yeah, according to this map, what's the average number of residents in each ward?
When we did it, and I'm gonna see if Mr. Colita can refresh my memory. My memory was that we had it down to such a low amount that we wanted to make sure it was in 1%, 1% or less. So as soon as the number was right around, I think it was like 9,000.
So the target number by the city was I believe it was 9,028 per ward, and I believe we were at 0.89% deviation, and that's a total deviation of plus or minus a total range of 0.89%. The requirement was within 1%. It was very challenging to get to that last level of detail because an individual block might, on those boundaries, might have 30 people or 40 people or 150 people. And you move one, you literally can't move it because of the control beyond the allowable deviation.
My question is, if this map is accepted, would any of the new city council persons be displaced out of the board that they represent?
That, well, looking at it, that could be a possibility. And so, okay, so generally we'll just say this, we can't take into consideration, we're not supposed to by law take into consideration if it moves someone out of there. And no disrespect to the council, people, I just want to say, I know that's one of the things we're not supposed to consider, but what we want to do is get all the input from everybody so that we can go back and look at everything and see what we need to possibly do.
So it should mirror everything. Like it should, everything that's on that should show up on the projector. It's just acting like Actually, I tried restarting his computer and that didn't work. I saw, oh, that was just the lights. I thought I saw some blue lights on it, but that wasn't the case. Okay.
Oh, no. Okay,
I'm still
I'm sorry.
thinking right now.
So I think the question
Yeah,
was,
I even
as far
tried to
as
plug
what
in Miss
would be
Angela's
the
computer,
impact
and that
to,
didn't work either. So that's a
or
whole
part of
new
the question,
computer.
what would
So
be the
literally, it
impact
can
to
only
the
be
current
the
council?
HDMI cord,
Would that
or
change
there's a
anything
problem with the
for the
entire
current
system.
council? And the answer is no, because like we're duly going to receipts by the residents, and we return in 5 years. And in addition to that, this will be applicable to elections going forward. So this is not, there's no retroactivity to this. This is all prospectively for future elections beginning in next year for the August 2022 election.
But I would say that if a line took a council person out of their ward, and the charter says that you must maintain residents in that ward, when you spot that out, you would raise that issue. And you have to seriously look at that.
Right, we're gonna consider all the comments from everybody. I just, like I said, we'll just make sure we do everything in accordance with what the law says that we can consider as we go forward. And I'm sorry, Councilman,
Go.
Mr. Woodson, may I defer to some of the council members?
Yeah.
Okay, Councilman Reardon.
What if someone got awarded as a council person? But we are using this for our next election, so does that mean, because my background job is to have more people in my ward than others, do I still represent those people for those 5 years? Or does the other council person now represent?
That's a really good question. Let's say that first. The question was, as the boundary was cut for council and I don't have a perfect answer for that. I do know that they are the people who voted in this past election. And so, their vote counted for that election. What is the import of that as far as I believe that will change going forward for the subsequent election as far as your representation of them when you get to the end of year 5. So I think that's really going to be, it's a little bit of a tricky answer. But yeah, that I will just say it will change. On this map. And then Councilman Pfeiffer had a question, I believe.
So, yeah, just to piggyback off implement the new ones, or would it not be implemented as far as the council people is concerned until the next election? And then my second question is, how many versions did after the first one we hit pay there, it stopped, or is there different versions of this?
So I'll start with the first, and then I'll tag off to Mr. Kalita. But you want to know as far as the impact of this map and when would it impact the council? Okay, and so Councilman Pfeiffer, it would, as far as for the election purposes, specifically, I'll just talk about that because I know you talk about representation. It would not impact this council for your current representation. It's going to happen, this is going to take effect, we have to have this in place 6 months prior to the next election, which will be the August 2022 primary. So it's going to impact the August election and those thereafter. Right, that's a very good point, which, because like I said, you're not gonna have another council election for another 5 years. So the next election that it will be impacting is the mayoral election, and as you said, that's a citywide election. So as far as will that change anything? No, everyone equally is voting for the mayor. So that will not change it for that. Like I said, it's more what's it going to do, going forward. And as Clerk Brown pointed out, the decennial census came in very late this year across the country because of the COVID crisis that everyone has been experiencing, and some still. So, like I said, that was just explaining a little bit of the delay, but we're still thankfully timely, but still, like I said, it's the COVID really everybody. And back to Mr. Woodson.
I mean, if somebody else has questions.
Before you go, can I chime in?
Oh, I'm sorry. That's right. There was a part 2 to the question, so I'm going to turn it back over to Mr. Kalita.
And I want to chime in on that. If this ward map changed prior to the August 22 election, and you got different people now in that ward, you might hang back and service some of them other ones. But when it come election time, they can't vote for you. So when the ward map changed, I'm gonna concentrate on servicing the people in that new ward because by law, that's who can vote for it. But if they move it over a street or two, I might service them too because they can talk to their neighbors. But that's what I would say if it relates to those changes.
So as to the question about how many versions of the map have been made, we had two sessions. I did a little preparatory work, just kind of refreshing on the software, getting used to that. We had two meetings. First meeting, first cut, it was several hours to go through and establish sort of these, I'll say rough boundaries, pretty close to these boundaries. But we were a little over the 1% threshold, and we just kind of going in circles at that point, trying to get those numbers to work out. And then we came back to a second meeting and worked through, a few of those little block changes that had to happen to get within that 1% deviation. So I guess I'd say this is really the first and only kind of map developed over 2 sessions.
I guess I have it's a hypothetical, but it could be something that really happens. Because to put something on the ballot, if I'm not mistaken, for May, I think you have to vote it, state county votes, and put something on May ballot countywide, right? And we have to have these maps done 6 months prior to August, which would be probably approximately March of 2022. So does that map go in effect March 2022? And if these new districts are drawn by, by March, and we have to vote in May, that means that we have new precincts by May, right? And we have to vote in those new precincts. How are we gonna go about letting and informing the people in new precincts and where they have to vote in this little bit of short of time?
Well, first of all, if I could indicate that if we are finally approved, then what happens is we do send out new voter ID cards to all of the registered voters in the city of Flint, appointing them to the correct or their new precincts and giving them their address of their new precincts and so forth. Okay? So in this case, we'd have to send out about 81,000 new ones and buy them up.
You what? Oh, so everybody in the city of Flint has to get a new registration
That's
card?
right. They would get a new voter registration card.
Whoa. So
Showing-
Secretary of State is already behind. So it has to come from Secretary of State, or we don't have to do anything?
No, we would do it, not the Secretary of State.
Oh, okay, so
We
we
would
don't have to do anything,
we
just,
we
all we
would
do is
do,
wait.
once every, then the local clerk's office then would send out the notifications of the new voter ID card to each individual registered voter in that location, giving them their full name and their full address, but also pointing out to them their new precinct and the precinct location, the precinct number. Okay?
Yeah, it might be difficult to hear some of the questions and the answers, so if we can help with that, we will.
Will this map affect our county commission or residents coming in August?
I don't think the board affects that at all. The county commissioners have been redrawn as well, as separate, completely separate process, and that's completed and approved. So the boundaries have moved all across the county.
Has been approved already?
They have been approved. Yeah, they're done. Yeah.
BB knew about it.
Oh, BB, yeah.
BB, what BB got?
At what point do we redraw the precincts? And if so, can we reduce the number of precincts?
So the question was, at what point do voting precincts get redrawn and the number be reduced?
What happens before the person, the voter, receives their new voter ID card? We do then go out and try to determine if their precinct needs to be relocated to a different spot. And we take into consideration the number of blocks or the number of miles from their home to the voting location. Because the one thing that we do not want to do in the city of Flint is to really make it impossible for a person to walk to their precinct or to be able to get a ride and maybe have to take a bus or if they not able to vote at all because they live too far away. The state law is not really very definitive in terms of how far the precinct has to be. But we make a determination and try to be sensitive to helping as much as we can. But in terms of trying to locate new spots to go in, we have to be concerned about the handicap accessibility. And if it's not handicap accessible, what we have to do is look at getting money from the state or from the city in order to make it handicap accessible. And I think when you look around Flint, that's why you will find that the majority of our locations are in school systems and so forth. But we did spend a considerable amount of money at Potter School some years ago and a couple of other locations to make everything voter accessible to those individuals who are handicapped and so forth. And in that regard, one of the other things that we did confer with the Handicap Commission here in the city of Flint, because we wanted to be sure that we did things correctly as it related to the handicap accessibility situation. Yes, ma'am.
One of the problems we've seen in major, particularly presidential, is some precincts have huge lines. In some precincts, you just walk in and you go. How are you going to balance the voting habits so that there's a little bit more balance among the precincts? So that, I mean, people care about the ward growth, obviously, and all the precincts have to be within the same ward. But are you going to be looking at these voting patterns to try to minimize wait times at the precincts that have a lot of traffic?
Yes, that's what we've done, Ms. Clinton, over the years. In 2000, when we did the recertification of all of this, we did that, as well as in 2010, which became effective in 2012. And certainly now, because, our population is becoming much older, and we want to be sure that everything is more readily available to our voters. We do not want to hinder them in any way at all. So we will be looking, yes. Because it seems as though everything's going to be decreased, we will have a smaller number of precincts. Currently, we have 61 precincts, so I can see the precincts based upon the new numbers of 81,000 people, maybe decreasing down to about 45 to 50 precincts. But in that regard, even though we have 61 precincts, we only have 26 locations, because many of those precincts are accommodated in the same building, and they're very clearly marked when you walk into the building with the number and so forth.
Can we speak of concerns now rather than have questions?
If we stick with the agenda, you can have public comments. That's one of the purposes. And then after public comments, we're going to have council comments. So if you have something, we will proceed. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I'm going to be in the second ward, that goes through looking at it. I know that being in a different ward. Looking at the third ward, I have some real concerns about the sustainability of this plant. If you look at that, the third ward, it develops the whole General Motors corridor, including all the commercial areas that are in that area, the railroad tracks and other things that.
Go ahead.
And other things that are considered detrimental to a lively neighborhood, to a neighborhood that you would build. And it makes sense to me that instead of putting all that into one ward and discouraging people from living in that area, not giving them a reason to build their neighborhood, you're giving them a reason to move elsewhere. But if you take, and so so the numbers, I personally, I see the numbers in the third ward dropping precipitously. They already are. Just today, there was a guy out putting foreclosure notices on houses in the third ward. And so, and we dropped nearly a third over this last, from the last census in the third ward. Of course, it was, the boundaries would be a little bit different. But the areas that we dropped the third from, they had better areas in this area the third ward will have.
But now you remember that the wards in these new houses are drawn based upon the census at that time, so every 10 years. What drops and moves after that will be for the next.
So why develop a ward that's going to diminish, and you're going to have to significantly go through this process again? Why not create a process where you divide those negative areas among the first, second, and third, and fourth wards?
Let me ask you this question. How can you assure me what will diminish and what will increase? Should we just go by the census that's been taken? Do we really get in the in-between predicting? We go by the census that's been taken.
So exactly, Eric, Councilman, Mayor, sorry. So when you look at the history of what's happened, like I just said, from the third ward, which is in a smaller area than this is showing, has dropped 1/3 in population since the last census in 2010. And so history is showing us that this area is one, and overall in Flint, we dropped about 21% over these 10 years. So the third ward is dropping faster than the rest. And so we have those numbers there. And then what we also can look at what's happening right now. I'm having friends, I'm getting emotional, I'm sorry.
No,
You understand me, okay?
I understand what you're saying.
So I'm having friends who are saying, we're moving, we can't take it, Mark. It's mostly due to crime. But what we're doing here is we're making the third ward the other side of the tracks. And you all know what I mean by the other side of the tracks, right? And these people who live in this area already are hurting bad, and we're going to make it worse. But that's
so
my
your concern was, can you look at that and draw a line with the even amount of people considering what might drop? I hear what you're saying, but
so I don't know if you can see this. So if you went across, you take the first ward, and you go from ward to
Ain't shit I can do. Tell them ain't shit I can do. I have no direct audio feed. I have to take room audio.
That's entirely encompassed in the third ward. And then do the same thing with the second ward, and then the third ward, and the fourth ward.
And that's what this process is. You, council people, the public, gonna get a chance to chime in, and we're gonna work off of the work as we have it, and then at the end, it'll be a decision made. So we fixing to go to work.
Are we coming in now?
You can comment.
As I looked at the census, first, second, and third ward dropped by 6,000. So first, second, and third ward, fourth, seventh, eighth, and ninth ward increased. So first, second, and third ward had to drop, especially third ward, because they have a lot of land, but not a lot of people. So they had to pick up a whole lot of space to make up that 9,000. First ward had to drop down because third ward had to go over into first ward a little bit. Second ward had to drop down into sixth ward over by northern. This is by law that you have to have 9 wards by the charter.
And an equal amount of people.
Right, an equal amount of people. And just because you moving the people into a new ward doesn't stop the people from coming into that ward. It's not like you're going to build a wall and say, hey, you know what, we
put new, districts and precincts and new boundaries and whatever. It's just that in order to keep the 9 wards by law, by charter, they had to drop everything down to the south in order to keep the numbers equal. And I mean, I know it's a hard job to do. I So my second question, right? Say we start building new schools, Flint started booming. I mean, it could boom over, 2 years time, right? And they start booming. And we didn't have to cut the precincts because we had to make a move like this because we decreased. Is by law, can you go in and say third ward, because they got so much stuff, they go over that 9,000, say they go up to 15,000. And now you can cut the precincts down. Is there a law that prevents you from going in there saying, hey, you know what, since I got new people, I can't wait for the next census. Can you open up new precincts to accommodate the people that's moving in those wards before the next 10 years of these nationals?
There is a really process that I would have to go into to get some approval from the state. Okay, and we've done that before. Okay.
Mr. Murphy.
Mark and Art, what it looks like been happening is over the years, a lot of development has been going on downtown Flint when you know about the housing stock and the development. And me as a councilman just sending a message to the whoever that's out there, we see it. The trend is a lot of investment is going around the downtown area and they building downtown out. But when you look at the first ward, the second ward, the third, and I think in the fourth ward, the trend is we losing a lot of people. So based on the data from the census count, you got the first, second, third, fourth, and probably the fifth ward that lost the most people. So that goes to show you that we need to build, especially that out. So I would like to see in the future, within the next 10 years, that when these Christians come back out, we'll see some development in the first, second, third, fourth, and fifth, so we can balance out the economic development. Because really, if we keep letting it go on like it is, these people building all these apartments and housing, no home ownership, apartment, and we gonna be owners to rental for the rest of our lives. We want to become home owners, and you could build some homes in the first, second, third, all of these neighborhoods that got these empty lots. Build that population back up, and I hope some of my colleagues will work with me to build up from, whether I'm the council or somebody else the council, we can start building that population back up, because it is ridiculous to see how this is going. And every time you turn around, we approving some housing development for somebody else, for another neighborhood that's gonna build their population up, and we approving tearing down some houses in our neighborhood. So I understand what they're saying.
Public comment, ma'am.
I don't know, but talk about the student loss of population. I do think that there needs to be a study as to why the population decreased so much. There have been 6 new funeral homes that have been built opened up in Flint. And, you know, we talk about people moving away, but is the extreme decreasing population of people so I don't I think after that, I'm just saying something we should probably look at it.
Well, when we look at population, I don't know every 10 years, when we get to a census, and the law requires an even amount at that time in each ward, somebody has to do the work to draw the line. And then in the process, we want public input as this process goes along. And then eventually, the city council, according to law, is going to adopt these new boundaries. And this is the first meeting, or the first stop of us with the public and the council as people on the committee that's working to do it. So the council is going to look at it, scrutinize it, tweak it with y'all help, or maybe as is, and then that's going to be the process that happens every 10 years.
Yes, Councilman, but I understand that the limits in the borders, I'm just asking, like, where do people go?
Well, I know my brother went to Atlanta. Some people used to come up here from the South. I know you didn't want an answer, but some of the answers we know. I know people went to Houston, Tennessee. They used to come into Flint because of all them jobs. But anyway, I just have to partially like that. Any more public comment? Sir?
Just kind of what I'm hearing. I think the messaging needs to be clear on when the boundaries take effect for recommendation. So like, if I'm in one of those locations that I just moved from that side of the street to this side of the street, and all of a sudden somebody else is representing me, like I should know, like when am I talking to him instead of her?
When that map is adopted, legally adopted.
Well, but it sounded not clear to me when she was trying to
we can try to clear
when
that.
it takes effect, because I heard 6 months before the next election, right? So, but most of them are gonna have a position longer than that, right? I mean, I know some of you just got elected, right? Most of you, so as a resident, I need to be clear, like, who's representing me, and does that change when this changes? Like, because if she's gonna be there 5 more years, and I'm only gonna be here until the next election, 6 months before the next election, like, I need to know, like, I need to start telling them the council person, like, I need, like, who do I express my concern?
That happened, you'll know.
So the messaging should be clear, because it didn't seem clear tonight, so when you're doing it.
We do that.
What's the line?
We do send out additional communication to each voter in addition to the voter card to forewarn them about the change and to give them various information and so forth. So it's a lot of communication that we have with each voter, each resident of the city before all of this is completed. Okay?
Public comment, communication.
Okay, Mr. Mayor.
Sir. Very loud.
Earlier before, we talked about population loss and all that stuff, and talked about how it's going like this. So I know quite a number of people who left Flint because, the job's not here. That or, the houses or whatever, but let's not talk about the weather. It's like houses, neighborhoods, jobs, and I hear it all the time. They move to Atlanta, they move to Phoenix, Tucson, Houston, Austin, San Antonio, Miami, Charlotte, you name it. So it's something about those cities like that, North Carolina, Florida, Georgia, Texas, and whatever, that's drawing people over there. That's what we need here. And if push comes to shove, we gotta improvise, like pull away from the auto industry and come up with something that's like,
maybe producing textiles, clothes, and other materials like that. Something that we haven't seen in America in a long time, just especially with clothing materials. Maybe if we start doing that.
Yeah, right now we gotta draw these lines. That's what we gotta do. That's the business of the day. Talking about these war times. Sir, you understand it'll be some notice go out. I might have to represent this person today. public comment, council comment. Council comment, we'll be out of here. I see you, Ariel. Go ahead, Ms. Murray.
I get what the gentleman is saying, and just for clarity, because my first understanding was that there is a 30 to 60 days that this has to be done. After it will be put in place. But our term is for 5 years. But it is in our best interest that if I know my boundaries will move, I will continue to serve 6 wards as the resident, as the boundaries are drawn for this past election. Is that correct?
Say that again. Say that after that again.
She said, do she represent the old boundaries or the new
Let
boundaries?
me say this. Right now today, you represent the people and the boundaries that exist. Once these new boundaries happen, that's going to be the ward and the people you represent, and hopefully you live in those boundaries. Now let me say this.
But that's in 2020, is that 2020?
22.
So next
But
year.
we don't have a ward election for city council.
Okay, well, keep servicing people outside your ward because they can't vote for you. When that new ward hit, pay attention to the people in your ward who can vote for
Right,
you.
I get that part, and that's what I'm saying is for clarity for myself.
Sure.
Is because I get that part, and I get what he's saying, because the people will still contact me, although I know I push up to Brown Street for, Councilman Pfeiffer. I get that part, but when we still service, we are still over the ward that we elected, the people. So it's kind of like a courtesy, I need to get to know your people, you need to get to know my people, so that we can keep, so we know where our boundaries are shifting.
Can I give you a reality? Right now, my boundary is like popular business. You know what helps me out? Because I get calls from way over here, way over there, way over here, and that's what I do. I try to service them. So that's the reality of what has helped me. If your boundaries change, you'll make a decision. You tell them to call the new council person, or you'll service them, or a combination of both. But in reality, just like what he talked about, when them boundaries change, when it changed by law, that's gonna be your new ward or district. What you do to people who might have been taken out, you'll decide.
Yeah, just to actually add some more clarity to it, because like I said, it's the boundaries that you have that are you're currently living in. One of the shifts until the 20. So that's when it'll impact you for purposes of election purposes. But that is getting to know the other folks as well. So it just won't shift it for the election because you're already in your position. So thank you.
I have one more. Yeah.
I just want to clarify. So both Quincy and I, or Councilman Murphy, and I will be moving over to the second ward if the ward is tested like this. And there won't be a person who lives in the third ward who was elected as a council person, I'm sorry. Is that, so what I heard you say, Quincy will continue to serve the boundaries under the current situation until 2026, did you say?
Let me clearly hear what you said. You said if Quincy is elected in the third ward boundaries now,
right,
and the boundaries change,
right,
your question is, what is it related to Quincy?
Will he still serve the old third ward, or will he not? Or will the third ward not have anybody serving there?
As long as he lives in that third ward.
He won't live in the third ward.
Okay, well, he won't agree, and we might not agree on those boundaries, because we got the final say of the boundaries. If this is an elected official and if we care about him, when he say that puts me out and he wanna tweak it, then we should wanna put him in. So this is proposed, and we as a body got the final say. Is that a fair statement?
You and the mayor.
I don't see the mayor's name in this. It says the legislative body.
Yeah, this is actually a task we specifically set aside for the legislative body. This is actually a task specifically for the legislative body to approve. So that's the control of that. And so whatever we present as far as the enforcement ordinance, the final approval comes through the council body to approve it.
So let's say they don't let me, just draw me out. Well, hold on.
Oh, yeah.
I'll come to you.
Okay.
Right. Go ahead, sir. Listen, y'all. Say that again.
How does this affect the people who live in the different boundaries?
I can give you an example. If on Pulaski, one of the residents I represent, Resident Trail is on Pulaski, and I look at this proposed map, and now it stops at Pearson Road, I lose him to the third ward. Some people with these new boundaries don't switch wards. Maybe not the ones in the middle, but some along the edge. Because by law, you have to change those boundaries to make sure it's an equal amount of people in each one of them. I think they should. Whether they will or not, I'm telling you, because I be tripping. Councilman May, I'm over here on Proctor. On Proctor, how can I help? That's going to be a decision that we make. We should always be able to help serve some people one way or another. If we can properly get them to their council, we can help them in a variety of ways. Ariel?
Oh, yeah. I live in third ward, sir. He's my neighbor. He just moved in. He's a Native American. I live on Milky Street, 3512, until I called the inspector to inspect my house, and he found out my house was not fit to live in. And the county moved me out into another house because I was black mold. But I'm saying this to say this: the Native American was he over there right now. He's talking right now about we defiant about moving out our neighborhood because we got a plan to settle this blight. But every time we think of something, the city land bank done cut down 8 of his trees in the Trail of Tears in at Pulaski Street, and there ain't gonna be another Oklahoma massacre on my street, Milton. The shortest street of black people in so Shallow is over there, and your daddy built Shallow, and we gonna build real big dang homes, and that's why you're talking stuff about the black don't count. Black people do count.
My question to you is, do you want that drawn inside the line or outside?
Ooh, yeah, that's right. Cause we gonna get our stimulus money and all that. Man, Russell, he dominated my house. And then these slum landlords.
Hey, so that was a good question, and I didn't hear an answer to that. I didn't really hear. No. I mean, I'm sorry.
What the gentleman or what time
I understand that once the new lines, once the new lines are drawn,
can y'all hear him speak up?
As elected officials, once the new lines are drawn and they receive those new voter cards, I would start servicing the new people no matter what.
And you might lose some.
And you're going to lose some. But my question is what I heard
what if this map took that council person out of that ward? And in the charter, it states that they must be a resident of that ward. So how many of these council people were taken out of their ward, and how will we go back to fix and make sure that they are in that ward before this map takes place?
With the National Guards, that's all.
They gonna help make sure. If they don't know where they live and they don't check their ward boundaries.
I mean, this doesn't
General
show the addresses
This is just the beginning.
streets.
I guarantee you, each one of them will look at it, I'll look at it, and I'm telling you, if I'm on the edge of that border, they finally got rid of it. But we will look at it, and we will have that decision. I think this is a nice council. I think they will be considerate if somebody is drawn out, but, you know, I'm gonna try to stay right in the middle. Because I know if I'm on the edge, finally, we got him out. But that's the answer